Hey, good morning, friends. Today is Thursday, April the 17th, 2025, and the time now is 8:10 a.m. So, friends, I want to talk briefly about the continuous escalation in the trade or the tariff war between the United States, Donald Trump, and China, the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping. I want to talk specifically about the fact that the United States is now imposing a 245% tariff on China or a 245% tariff on some Chinese products. Just recently, the Trump administration, as much as it came out swinging earlier in April, about April 2nd, imposing a tariff, economic war on the rest of the world, over 180 countries. Trump basically paused after facing backlash, where we saw stock markets all over the world and even in the United States, stocks prices were plummeting. Donald Trump basically paused for 90 days the tariff on various countries or on every countries with the exception of China, to the point where as of now it is obvious that this is an economic war against China. It is not about fairness or whatever Trump is saying, because the trade deal between the United States and China and the United States and the rest of the world is fair in that the United States look at the win-win situation in terms of the trade. The US benefit in one way or another with the trade relationship with the rest of the world. Therefore, my friends, it is obvious that as of now, what we are seeing or experiencing is nothing but a trade war, an economic tariff warfare that Donald Trump's United States is waging against the rest of the world, and in this case, on China, because it is obvious that it is an unfair attack on China. At least that's what it seems. Donald Trump came out swinging, imposing tariff on every country, to the point where some countries are basically calling Donald Trump, okay, the Trump administration, to basically renegotiate. Trump has been bragging. In one event, he gave a speech where he bragged that countries all over the world are calling him to kiss his ass. I do believe if there was one event, one situation that could have destroyed the United States economy or destroyed the trust that the rest of the world has on the United States, is that one event when Donald Trump is referring to leaders and countries around the world as ass kissers, countries and leaders that are calling him to kiss his ass. As I said in one video, no leader, no country, no people want to see themselves appear to look like or to be the ass kissers. So even the poorest, the weakest country in the world, the leaders, the weakest leaders in the world, I believe will try to impose themselves onto the United States to stand strong as a means to look tough in the eyes of their own people and to the United States, to not capitulate. But as I said earlier, Trump came out swinging, and he swung harder to the point where countries around the world have been calling the US to negotiate, and China hasn't done it. China, as I've said in one of my videos, is looking to be the only country strong enough or brave enough to take on the United States and to fight back. Trump imposed a 34% tariff on China. The Chinese reciprocated, imposing 34% tariff of their own on the United States. Donald Trump then hiked the tariff percentage on China from 34% to 104%. The Chinese reciprocated, imposing, okay, or hiking their tariff on the United States goods and products to 84%. To the point where I've said before that the Chinese did that as means to not throw out their hands out there, to not just give everything that they have. They have to go incrementally, while the United States and Donald Trump is going ballistic, just throwing everything out there. They said that what you want to do is not letting your enemies know what you are capable of doing, your capability. So you have to deal with your enemy incrementally, very slowly. Keep your enemies guessing. What the United States is doing by just hiking tariff, It makes the United States looks weak. It makes the United States looks desperate, and the Chinese are appearing to look very calm and calculated. In this case, it is a good practice for the United States to allow China, to force China to not recognize its potential, which seemed to be the opposite. It was the same case with the war in Ukraine, where now it is obvious in the United States the term FAAFO is very popular, which is fuck around and find out. Because of what the United States and the West did in Ukraine and how they came about in the war, basically bombarding the Russians with sanction here, sanction there, sanction on this, sanction on that. The West has been fighting the Russians to the point where the Russians are appearing or they are coming up strong or stronger. I think Russia, as of now, have come to realize its strength and the weakness of the West. And the rest of the world has also come to realize that. I think this is the case with Trump's economic and tariff war against China and the rest of the world. I feel like China and the rest of the world are coming to acknowledge, to realize their potential, their strength, and the weakness of the United States, or the limitations of the United States. Once again, Trump imposed a 34% tariff on China. The Chinese reciprocated with a 34% tariff of their own. Donald Trump then increased the tariff percentage on China to 104%. Instead of the Chinese matching that, the Chinese increased their tariff on the United States to 84%. Donald Trump then increased United States tariff percentage on Chinese goods and products to 125%, and the Chinese then reciprocated, increasing their tariff percentage on the United States goods and products to how much? 125%. However, friends, Donald Trump has increased the United States tariff percentage on China to about 145% and now to 245%. The Chinese are showing confusion. They are confused like, where is this calculation coming from? And the rest of the world, even Americans and prominent observers and commentators on international relations, are very confused about how the United States is coming up with the tariff calculations. Now, friends, just yesterday, news came out. Basically, the Trump administration released a document, and Trump signed an executive order launching an investigation to the threat posed, as the Trump administration sees it, the threat posed by the United States' reliance on rare earth metals and minerals from other countries or from adversarial countries, as the Trump administration sees it. The truth here is, the United States, I won't say the United States has been dependent on any country for this or that resources, because in essence, the United States and the West have always owned people's resources and raw materials. Every country in the world, to an extent, the United States and Western countries do have influence in these countries. They control these governments. Look, friends, we have to be honest that there is a handful of countries in the world today, of almost 200 countries, that are independent completely of Western dominance. We can say Russia as of now, definitely China, Iran, North Korea, and so on. The entire Africa, South America, the Caribbean, almost the entire East Asia, Southern Asia, the entire Asia, the entire Middle East, and Europe, to a greater extent or even lesser extent, the United States and the West. We can say that the United States and the West does have some level of control over these countries and government, whether greater or lesser extent. Now, friends, as we know as of now, the Trump administration is imposing tariff on Chinese goods and products, some Chinese goods and products, totaling up to 245%. And the justification for this is that China is retaliating against the United States tariff. I said it before that what we are seeing from the West and the United States is nothing but tantrum. The West has always had the infantry, to do something, to do things to countries and institutions. And when the countries and institutions retaliate, they throw a tantrum. So basically, what Donald Trump is saying is that the United States and Donald Trump should attack China, attack the Chinese economy, and China should do nothing. So recently, the Chinese, in addition to hiking their tariff percentage on the United States goods and products, China is now suspending or restricting rare earth metal export to the United States, and the US is now angry. And friends, this is perhaps the most important reason, or one of the reasons, for why the United States President Donald Trump has signed or is signing an executive order launching an investigation onto the threat posed by the United States' reliance on foreign countries or on other countries for natural resources. Now, I can't say that the United States has had any reliance on any country for this or that because the United States, as I've said, and the West have always owned other countries and people's resources. The United States and the West have always controlled world's resources and the allocation and what the spread, okay, the shipment of world's resources. I think in this case, what we are seeing is just another country that is powerful that has come to equalize the United States in economics, infrastructure, military, finance, and so on, and in other ways. It's now standing up to the United States. So we are seeing the United States president and the United States throwing tantrum. Because this is a war, an economic war started by the United States President Donald Trump, not China and not the rest of the world. But from what the White House is saying, they are releasing statements that paint the United States to be the victim. The United States is not the victim. The United States has always benefited in one way or another from the trading relationship with other countries. Donald Trump, I do believe, is just throwing fit because this is a dominant or dominance perspective or policy, a white power, United States power, or superiority complex position that the current White House is taking. And they are acting from that perspective or that policy, which, as much as I've said many times, it's making Donald Trump, his administration, and the Trumpers feel happy and powerful, and the United States currently feel happy and powerful and strong. In the long run, it is going to backfire against the United States because, as I've said again, we are seeing the rise, exponential rise in international organizations, okay? The expansion of organizations such as BRICS and so on. There are calls in Africa or within the global African community for the expansion, the strength, okay, the recalibration or the restructuring of organizations such as the African Union, ECOWAS, and so on. And we are seeing great example from the Sahel states, which are basically demonstrating what many Africans perceive Africa should do. Focus on African growth internally, use African resources internally for African growth and prosperity, and begin to focus less on the rest of the world, especially on the West, and refuse Western dominance over Africa. Now, friends, I believe that the increase in the tariff percentage on China by the United States is senseless, it's unnecessary, and it does make the United States look very bad. It makes China look like the adults in the room. It makes China look calm. And it makes China look like the country that is only, I won't say reacting, but making a calculated decision based on an attack by an enemy. In this case, one could say the United States, okay, from the Chinese perspective, is the enemy. But I do believe that what we are seeing is going to continue to spiral out of control until one of the countries, the United States or China, capitulate. And I will say that I don't think the Chinese are going to capitulate, or at least not easily, because there is one thing, okay, or narrative that is very prominent within the Chinese narrative, the Chinese cultural sense of themselves, which is the years, okay, or the centuries of humiliation. The idea that China was humiliated in the 1800s by the West, and the Chinese don't want to go through that, okay? The 1800 to early 1900 until the revolution in China. The Chinese feel like they were humiliated. In the Chinese perspective, capitulating to the United States in this term, okay, currently, especially in a conflict that the United States president started, in a current international relations, at the time when China has cultivated for itself a very prominent international perspective of China, of what China is, could be, or should be. The Chinese are not going to go down without a fight, because I do believe that China sees what Trump is doing. Should they fall to it, will be another form of humiliation to China. Now, friends, you're watching the playlist series, The Trends and Headlines in Geopolitics, and this is episode 35. Once again, friends, you are watching the playlist series, The Trends and Headlines in Geopolitics, and this is episode 35. Now, friends, please tell me what you think, and I really want to know what you think. But, friends, I'm going to end here. I want to thank you for being a member of the Echoing Voice community, my friends, but most especially and most importantly, or most important, friends, I want to thank you a lot for watching the Echoing Voice. Peace.